I'm Darren Morton,
I'm Simon Matthews. This is Lift.
the Lifestyle Medicine podcast where we dive into the science of health and well-being.
Hey Darren, great to see you again this week. Nice to be back together.
Always good to see you, brother. Always.
So I've got a question for you. What's your BMI?
Oh, my BMI. Oh no. Well, I've got to preface this before I give a response to this. So, we actually, first of all, explain for our listeners who might not be aware what BMI actually is.
True.
And then I'll tell
Okay,
you.
so BMI, of course, is Body Mass Index, and we'll get into the history of it shortly. But it's essentially a rule of thumb measure. It's a quick measure for really assessing whether you're within or outside a healthy weight range for your particular height.
Okay, so now that said, do you have a sense that I'm a little bit reluctant to share here? But I'm going to. I want to
do
preface
actually. Well, let's talk about that as well in a moment.
We will. So I'm prefacing this with I've actually been quite diligent with resistance training lately, right? So that's my little caveat. So I'm actually running at about 78 kilos at the moment, which is quite heavy for me. I sort of fluctuate for a bit, normally about sort of 75 to 78. So I'm at 78 at the moment. I am 176 centimeters tall. This means nothing, by the way, to our American colleagues, but what it means, I have a BMI right at the present of 25.2. So I'm just sort of hanging my head a little bit.
Interesting.
25.2.
Yeah. Which using the BMI scale puts you conceptually just inside the overweight range.
Thank you for clarifying that in this public forum. Yes.
So there's so many things that we need to talk about already here, and the first one I want to talk about is what you just shared, which is the reluctance to engage in this. There is a lot of shame associated with body weight, body mass index, and so on for a lot of people. And one of the observations I think that I've made about BMI over time is that because of these kind of cutoffs, so 20 to 25 is ideal weight, under 20 is underweight, 25 to 30 is overweight, and then we start getting into grades of obesity as well. Because of those cutoffs, it's very easy to internalize a sense of I've failed. I'm not measuring up here. I'm not doing as well as I should be. And of course, that's broadly, I think, unhelpful if we want to encourage people to focus on the benefits of living a healthy lifestyle, the ways that are within their power and control to do that, and so on. So I think it's important to acknowledge that that BMI has, in particular, has somehow been tangled up with a sense of judgment and shame in a way that other measures haven't. So, for example, HbA1c. I mean, there's not a narrative that I'm aware of around a sense of shame about having an HbA1c level above a certain number, or an LDL-C level above, or an HDL below, and so on. It seems to relate uniquely to body weight.
Yeah, I wonder about that. To be honest, when I have my blood work check, and now I'm off to get just a general medical checkup in a couple of days' time, and they'll do blood work again. There is something when I see, my cholesterol's low, or there is a sense of I feel good about that. I mean, I obviously feel good about that, but I think I'm thinking if I was in a situation where my markers were high, I probably would be a little reluctant to want to have to share that, particularly as a lifestyle medicine enthusiast. So yeah, I wonder to what extent that is the case. I think the thing is that BMI is such a well adopted and well applied and well used, for good or for bad. And maybe that's what we're going to be talking about today. But I think maybe it's one of those metrics that's a lot more, understood by people. And and I can definitely say, it's interesting that you asked that led to that question of what's my BMI, because I never get below 24. So that's just, and I'm running very lean at that point in time. If I was doing a lot of cardio work and a lot of running, and my BMI might be sort of 24.5. And then if I sort of pull back on that a bit and I do some more resistance exercises, and there might be, I certainly don't feel like I'm carrying a lot of extra. But the fact when I saw that I just punched it in and my BMI is 25.2, I'm thinking, oh, it's quite, it is a little fronting. So there's definitely that. There's a psychology that goes with it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And that sense of shame and judgment that a lot of people carry around with them about their health is very, very unhelpful. We see the same thing with mental health, of course, as well. There's a lot of stigma associated with putting your hand up and saying, you know what, I'm not traveling so well at the moment.
Yeah.
So this is one of the really unhelpful discourses that we have in healthcare, of course. This idea of not making the mark in some way. The history of BMI is really interesting, Darren, and it's worth understanding, I think, so that we can fully understand maybe some of the benefits and also the limitations of BMI. So it's now a very, very old measure. In fact, it's been around about 200 years. It was first conceptualized by someone called Adolf Kettler in the 1830s. And critically, this is the really important part, it was intended as a measure of population health, not individual health. It was never intended to be a calculation that we make for an individual and then say, Darren, your BMI is 25.2. We better do something to get that down. Instead, it was intended to be able to get an assessment of the overall health of populations. And during the 20th century, I guess as it became more well known, it started creeping into day-to-day medical practice and started being used more and more as a means of supposedly assessing an individual's health. And it simply wasn't designed for that purpose at the outset. It's a very simple calculation. In fact, it's ridiculously simple. And if you think about that for a moment, then it also becomes clear that such a simple calculation is probably not going to give you anything really valuable by way of individual information. So it's simply the ratio. Your BMI is the ratio of your height in meters squared divided by your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared. So it's a very, very simple ratio. I don't think does a great deal to explain anything. You probably heard some of the BMI exceptions. You've just shared an exception yourself. The time when you engage in resistance training, which is good. We want to see people grow and develop muscle, and simply because of the height that you happen to be, that muscular development.
That was your polite way of saying that I'm short compared to you. Because I haven't asked this question. What's your BMI, Simon?
Oh, what's my BMI? Interesting. Well, I'm my height. So What did you say your height was? 176
Well,
centimetres?
for the Americans and
What
most
is it?
Australians
What is it
understand
in
this.
the old money?
That's right. In the old money, about 5'10", 5'10" and a
5'10".
half.
Okay. So I'm 6'4". So there's about 6 inches difference between us.
Yep.
In new money, my
Yep.
height is 194 centimetres.
Yep.
My weight also hovers around sort of around about 78. So about where you are right
So
now.
there you go. So
which
we're weighing
which
in
makes
the
my
same.
BMI about 20, just over 20. So in some sense, I'm at the opposite end, and if I lose even a little bit of weight, then theoretically I would be in an unhealthy weight range. And I got to say, I don't feel unhealthy, as I'm sure you don't either.
I think one thing that you identified in when you said about the history, the 1830s this was developed as a population level measure of sort of, weight status. But even then, I imagine it was probably for a particular population because for example, at the university I teach at, we have a lot of, like Polynesian, from the South Pacific Island students. And I actually feel almost embarrassed talking about BMI with some of them because a lot of them have particularly the males, a lot of muscular development. I know that many of them would actually be over 30. They'd be in that sort of obese category, and yet they can be very, very lean, but just have a lot high levels of muscular development. So definitely, I think it was designed for probably a European population, I would imagine.
This is one of the significant criticisms of BMI that it doesn't take any account of body fat distribution, and we now know that distribution of body fat is pretty important. So what's called central adiposity, having a lot of body fat distributed around your middle, it appears to be more harmful to your health than, say, high levels of subcutaneous fat or body fat distributed, through your legs, your arms, and so on. It doesn't take any account of gender or age, ethnicity, cultural background, level of activity, and so on. It doesn't differentiate between fat and muscle, for example. So there are lots and lots of shortcomings with the BMI as a measure. And as you said, at the time it was developed, about 200 years ago. So this predates significant international travel. It likely focused on a really, really narrow population group, a really small population group. So it's used, or it has been used, to classify weight in populations and to get a sense overall of the health of a population. So when we read, for example, that about 1/3 of the Australian population is within an ideal weight range, about 1/3 is overweight, and about 1/3 is obese, then it's likely that BMI is being used as a measure for that, as a way to derive that data.
So if it has these limits,
but it's problematic.
It is problematic. So what's a better? It's actually interesting. You made me think of something. We did a study one time, and it was actually on participants that had been through a lifestyle intervention. It was called CHIP, and we had data on about 5,000 participants, and we had their BMIs. So we had their height and weight, and we also had their blood work, so we could actually see their cholesterol levels, fasting sugar levels, and all the rest of it. And what was really fascinating is when we started to analyze it, there were about 1/3 of the people who were quite lean, like had low BMIs, that were still metabolically very unhealthy, so had elevated blood markers. And there were others who actually had high BMIs, about 1/4 of them, who actually were quite metabolically healthy as well. So what it's like, and we didn't have, I remember thinking, I wish we had other measures, like some other way to delineate what's actually going on here, and particularly with reference to where's this weight, where's this, adipose tissue distributed? Because we certainly, as you've indicated, that central obesity, it's a lot more metabolically active, seems to spill over into our blood a lot more. So, which obviously leads to attempts have been made to become more precise with this measure. And so tell us about that.
LIFT is supported by the LIFT Project, an educational adventure where you learn science-based ways to lift your mood and your life. The LIFT Project is lifting lives around the globe, in healthcare settings, workplaces, schools, universities and communities. To find out more, visit theliftproject.global.
Yeah. So there's a new index being developed, and it's not widely in clinical use at the moment. It's called the Body Roundness Index, the BRI, and it's also an index that uses your height, but instead of using your weight as the other part of the ratio, it uses your waist circumference as the other part of the ratio. So it becomes then a measure of the ratio between your waist circumference and your height. And the reason that's really significant is because what it then does is capture body shape. And if your central adiposity increases, as you get fatter around the middle, your waist circumference increases as well. And as we mentioned earlier, central adiposity is now recognized as a key indicator of metabolic health.
Can I just jump in here and just say, at first glance, my first reaction to, as you're explaining this, so if someone said to me, oh, you have a high body mass index, I'd be like, okay. If someone said to me, you have a high body roundness index, I think psychologically I'd probably be more damaged by that. So that's just honestly, that's my first response.
Yeah.
Thinking about
this is a great a great point, because again, one of the challenges that I think we have in healthcare is the challenge of shame and creating standards and creating expectations by which people are shamed, and that's not the outcome that we want in health behavior change. It's not the outcome that we want in lifestyle medicine. In fact, we want the diametric opposite. We want people to capture and internalize an idea of what it means to be vital, what it means to thrive in life, and to be able to create for themselves a pathway towards that, rather than to feel embarrassed and ashamed and to try and find a pathway away from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, while I don't like the name necessarily, I do like the concept. And I think that it certainly would, tease out some of those individuals who might have a high body mass index but are still quite lean and have high levels of muscularity. So they're.
Well,
I'm just thinking.
Here's the fun. Do you want to hear the formula?
I would love to know this. I've been thinking. So how do we actually calculate this thing? Because
Okay,
BMI is relatively simple to calculate.
BMI is ridiculously easy. BMI is your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared. Very easy.
Yes.
All right. You can easily calculate your BRI as well, your body roundness index.
Okay.
Very, very straightforward. You ready? Okay.
Yes.
So this is the formula that was used in the clinical studies. 364.2 minus 365.5 multiplied by the square root of 1 minus your waist circumference divided by pi multiplied by your height in meters all squared.
Okay, so I've just been doing the sums in my head as you've been speaking, and
What
I
did you
think
get?
I've got no idea. Yeah, well, I wonder as to the utility of that particular measure. What do you think?
Well, clearly it doesn't have utility at an individual level. We're not going to send people home and tell them to monitor their BRI. That's impractical. Although there are, of course, there are online calculators where all you need to do is take out a tape measure, input your waist circumference, and then input your height, which most of us know anyway, and the online calculator will do the rest. But at a clinical level, it probably does have greater utility because it focuses much more on that idea of central adiposity and the distribution of fat. That formula, by the way, is actually a formula for how elliptical your body is. That formula calculates the ellipticality of your body. So if you think about a long, skinny ellipse versus a shorter, broader ellipse, that's kind of what the measure is.
Well, I would be an advocate for using that because I think the average person has no idea what being elliptical is, but having a high elliptical score, I'd be pretty proud of that. So maybe we need to create some confusion. Maybe you need to campaign for none of this Body Roundness Index. We're going to give some sort of your elliptical score, and well done you, regardless of what you got.
So it probably does have some utility particularly for measuring obesity-related clinical risks and overweight-related clinical risks. Those two things in particular, I think, are likely to be good outcomes of something like this. It's clearly a much more sophisticated measure.
And what I actually, and I think what it captures and what it takes in, because there have been other attempts to try and accommodate the challenges associated with BMI. For example, I know waist to hip ratio was a way that was quite commonly used for some time because we knew the sort of the apple shape is more dangerous than a pear shape.
That fact, sort of waist. Gary Egger, I think, used to advocate the waist to hip ratio.
Waist to hip ratio.
Yeah.
And then they tended to simplify it, and it went towards just the waist ratio, girth. But the problem with that, once again, is that if you're a tall person, that can be inflated, even though you're proportionally doing great. So I think I like the logic behind it. I like the idea behind it. I do wonder as to what extent it will catch on, certainly in the mainstream arena, if people have to go to a online calculator to try and figure out what it's talking about. Out of interest, have we got an estimate of what scores are good and what the range is from?
So I don't have those off the top of my head, but I think I suspect it's going to be maybe around the 2.5s.
Is a good score?
I think I haven't measured my own BRI, but in fact, if we could find a calculator to do that. In fact, Mandy, our producer, may have access to a calculator right now. And Mandy, if you're listening and able to find a BRI calculator, Darren and I can share our height and weight with you. Well, we already have, and you could let us know. But apart from that, the other important element here is to remember that the BMI, the BRI, any of those things are simply heuristics. They're shortcut ways that we have of endeavouring to try and get at a much more complex picture. And, heuristics are therefore limited. So, for example, Darren, if I said to you, I want you to close your eyes for a moment and imagine that you're walking through a forest, walking through, maybe a park or a forest, and as you're walking along, you get a sense of there being something behind you, you turn around and the first thing you notice is long black fur. You can see 4 limbs and a being or a creature that's much bigger than you. What are you thinking you're looking at right now?
A bear.
Yeah. So you've just used a heuristic to do that. And your heuristic is a hairy black creature with 4 limbs that's bigger than me is likely a bear.
Mm.
But you might have also just missed being entertained by me as a singing telegram dressed up as a gorilla. That's a job that I used to do. Dress as a gorilla and deliver singing telegrams.
I'm learning a lot about you, Simon. Yes.
And heuristics make us miss those fine details. They make us miss other possible explanations for something. A heuristic guides us into a particular way of thinking about something that's most likely helpful to us and most likely will enhance our chances of survival when the chips are down. But it's also limited and often misses layers of detail and complexity and nuance. And BMI and BRI are both like that. They're heuristics. They give us a shortcut means of getting some sense of something, but we miss a lot of detail. You've mentioned some of the detail. Some of that detail can be your underlying blood work and metabolic markers. But in a lifestyle medicine framework, we miss a bunch of other really important stuff too. BRI won't tell us about the quality of your social connections. It won't tell us about, the mind-body connections that you make, about how much you engage in practices to support your own overall well-being, your overall stress levels. A BRI won't tell us about the level of physical activity you do and the type of physical activity you do. It won't tell us about your sleep. All it does is say, well, this ratio suggests that there are likely to be some clinical consequences, or maybe not likely to be some clinical consequences, and therefore cues us to action. So, yes, it probably has a role to play, and we need to be careful not to fall into the trap of using this, or for that matter, any other heuristic, as a means to try and understand the complexity of an individual person's health. It also, BRI critically also doesn't measure a person's subjective experience of what it means to thrive in life, what it means to feel vital in their day-to-day life, what it means to add life to their years and to live the meaningful and purpose-filled life that they really want to. And we know how important all of those things are to our health and well-being. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I think it's a case of watch this space. I think that the logic behind it is very interesting. As I said, the name, not so sure about. But certainly it seems I've just done a quick Google search. I think I've got a score of about 2.7. So,
2.7. So I guess the 2.5 was probably
you did well.
Yeah.
So anyone can jump online, Google it, see what your score is. And Simon, if you want to start pushing for it to be renamed to something that involves the elliptical nature of what it represents, I'm backing you 100%, brother.
So you're 2.7. You're moderately elliptical then.
Moderately elliptical. I'm proud of that. I can own that. I'll wear that.
Yeah, I'm going to encourage you to put that on your LinkedIn profile.
There you go.
Moderately elliptical. Put it on your business card. Put it at the bottom of your email signature.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And folks, if you are enjoying the podcast, do us a favor, share it with someone that you know. Let them know about it as well. Don't forget to subscribe. If you subscribe, you don't have to wait and look for the next episode. The next episode will come to your podcast feed, and you will never miss a single episode by doing that.
Lift is presented by Simon Matthews and Darren Morton. It's sponsored by the Lift Project and supported by Avondale University. Music provided by Pixabay. If you have a question or a topic you would like to hear more about, send us an email to podcast@theliftproject.global. The Lift Project. Lift your mood, lift your life.